Welcome to the Amphibian Press podcast. I'm Sara, and with me today are the two halves of OE Tearmann, Olivia and Nonir. So thank you so much for joining me all the way from Colorado.
Thanks for having us. We're really excited.
I know we've been talking about this for a long time, so it's nice to finally, get it done.
Actually see your
Right?
one person.
I'm a real human being, not just an email account. So you guys are the authors of Aces High, Joker's Wild series, which is like my favorite. Biased here. So if you don't mind, for those of our listeners who haven't heard me fangirl about it for the past few months, give us a little background.
Well, the series revolves around a unit in a resistance force fighting to bring democracy back to the America of 2155, which is owned by 7 corporations. And the story revolves around a team called the Wildcards, who have the highest success rate in the resistance force and also the highest rate of disciplinary
issues.
Reports, including sending an inflatable sheep sex toy to another base. That's how they act. So that's the basic premise of the series. It's the adventures, the trials, the struggles, and the hopefulness of this found family.
I definitely love the sort of Firefly aspect of that, like, ragtag band versus this big, like, faceless, austere corporation or, force of some sort. That's something I've always gravitated towards, for sure. So tell me a little bit about your inspiration, especially for the two main characters, Aiden and Kevin.
Well, Aiden really came from my personal experiences and trying to kind of untangle gender for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I originally was writing a solo novel around Aiden and a separate love interest. And then I tagged Olivia and I'm like, hey, would you help me with some world building for this?
And I went, ooh!
Then the solo novel died and Wildcards came about. And Kevin is mostly Liv's, what would you say, love of retro?
Kevin is a couple of things. He started out as just a love interest for this character who already existed. And I ended up getting in a lot of, I guess, my own personal issues. I come from a family that really pushes education is the way to rise in society. But they have a lot of internalized elitist tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those tendencies came in, but the more his character evolved, the more it was a way to explore how does somebody with privilege use it right? How does somebody with privilege use it to help others? And I'm bi, so he also became a chance for me to explore how do you live in a world where you slide in and out of identities? And in some places what you are is a good thing, and in some places what you are is a threat. Some folks who are marginalized, it's just you're always fighting every day. But for someone, I'm also mixed race, and so for someone who has identities that are
in the middle of things,
variable, sometimes it's easy to feel like you just disappear in the right circumstances, and that is a passing privilege. But it's also a different kind of wound to have to hide whenever it's convenient. So a lot of that got worked in. And then I just love the idea of the history buff. So Kevin lives in 2155, but he's obsessed with what he thinks of as the 80s, which is actually from the 60s to the 90s. I love working in all those anachronisms of the amateur history buff. I love history. I don't get what it's going on, but I love it. So I like working on all those mistakes.
I do love that one line where he says, have you seen the classic Shrek? It's like a world where Shrek is considered a classic.
Well, and I love getting in Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire, because that song, Kevin loves it, and it drives him up the wall. Because he's like, this song is awesome. what the hell is it about? I don't get it.
And then he drives everyone else up the wall because they're like, what is happening? Why is this song playing all the time? Kevin, stop.
And why is it on 11? Turn it down.
I also love that in some ways, calling all of those decades the 80s is poking gentle fun at the fact that a lot of cyberpunk worlds are really stuck in the 80s in a lot of ways. Because, I mean, that's when the genre, for the most part, hit the mainstream. And that's really fun. And it's also, I think, a good way to modernize it for, slightly younger generations who might not have actually seen the 80s or might not remember them. So that's really fun.
Yeah, and it's actually a direct personal weakness of mine. I call everything 80s music. And
it's true, she does.
I'm married to a guy 10 years older than me, and he regularly goes, that's from the 70s. So, yeah.
It's always interesting looking back at our characters and how much of ourselves we put in them on accident.
Yeah.
Because, like, when I was creating Aiden, I knew that he had my gender issues and he had my anxiety, but the way that he kind of deals with it and the way that he learns to lean on people is something I'm still working on. And so, like, my character has now become my own role model. And that's, like, really bizarre, but also really cool.
Well, I think that's important too, because as you explore that, you know that your readers are going to be able to explore that, whether it's something that they themselves feel on some level, or if it's something that's newer to them. They can explore that with Aiden and with you, and that's sort of like the point, right?
I mean, that's why I write mostly marginalized characters. I think it's important that we get them more into the mainstream and expose people to these different experiences, because, especially with the way society is going right now, we remember how to be empathetic. And one of the things Liv and I had started this project with was that art changes the world. Art is at the core of every revolutionary period. And so kind of our goal is, if we can contribute to that motion and to that movement nowadays and increase empathy and teach people, hey, just because they're different from you doesn't mean that they're not people, then I think we've achieved our goal.
Yeah, and something else we really enjoy showcasing is radical compassion. For example, we have a character in the story who's neurodivergent, Tweak. She's an amazing coder, but if you scare her at the wrong moment, she will break your nose.
Poor Topher.
One of our other characters gets his nose broken because he scares Tweak at the wrong moment. But what I wanted to show, partly with Tweak, aside from just kick-ass coding, was there are different kinds of strength. And in the right setting, if you give somebody the support they can reach potentials you never would have expected. But they need that support first. You have to give everyone a chance to rise. And that does take radical compassion. Yes, she freaked out. Yes, she can be dangerous. So make sure she has some anti-anxiety meds and tell everybody, don't touch Tweak. And then you have an amazing coder. If they had done what, say, a school would do, which is, you're suspended. You broke somebody's nose. You're a danger to other students. You're suspended. They never would have gotten anywhere. But if you say, okay.
We wouldn't have had a story.
Exactly.
At the second half of the book.
Exactly. But if you say, okay, we understand you have some serious problems. You need to work on them, but we will support you in working on them. It's not a pass by any means. It's, you need to get your crap together. We'll help you do that.
It's something that we've done as friends too.
Yeah.
Because we've been friends for, what, a decade now?
Nigh on a decade, yeah.
And when we both started, we were, let's be real, anxious wrecks. And then learning to support each other and encourage each other's growth. We've come a long way, and here we are publishing books about crazy people.
And radical compassion, yeah.
About us.
To a degree, and a lot of our friends and family.
Don't tell people that.
Yeah, people are going to start wondering who they are.
All right.
Oh,
I'll say it straight out because my family knows it. My family's crazy.
I think most families are crazy in
Most
some
families are
way.
crazy.
I also love what you did with therapy and working that in a very seamless and just natural, a very organic way, with Aiden's therapeutic program that his friend made for him. And that's something that you don't see. I mean, we're seeing it more now, especially in like more contemporary and YA books.
it's
But-
still not spec-fic.
Yes, exactly. And
Given the situations people are put in spec-fic.
I know.
mhm. And that's it's like with sci-fi and with fantasy too, and in a lot of ways it's like you're putting these characters through very traumatic situations, and they probably should process those, whether it's with friends like you guys, or whether it's with an actual trained professional, which it should be. And I really loved what you did with that, because that's something you really don't see a lot of.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think something I really wanted to address is we didn't want to fix our characters. We
Mhm.
didn't want them to be cured, but we wanted to show that you can have these problems and learn to cope with them in a healthy way and live with them and have a happy life and have a good life, even when you've got some wiring problems. That's what my family calls it. It's a joke. We all have wiring problems. But I have younger cousins who I want to, this partly got in there because I have younger cousins who have wiring problems and family who have wiring problems, and I wanted to showcase you can have a good life. And then
I think Omi initially we started tossing that idea around when I started going to therapy.
yes.
So it was, in addition to that, kind of a little bit of mental health activism thrown in. I'm not one of those people who's like, I'm going to force activism and politicalness into my stories, but if I have a chance to add something that increases that message and it works in the story, then heck yes, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
So as I was starting my own therapy and like talking to my therapist and really digging into these sorts of things, we were talking, I was like, you know what, Aiden needs this.
Yeah. And
he needs it as a character, and he needs it as a political statement in the book and in the world. And then we figured out Omi.
Yeah, and then it was really funny because Nonir going to therapy gave me the guts to actually go and get some stuff worked out myself, because I went to the doctor saying, hey, I'm having heart problems, and some family have died from heart attacks. And the doctor was like,
this is anxiety, honey.
Yeah, you're not having heart problems. You're having a panic attack. My response was, no, I'm not. And so having a friend who was dealing with the things in a healthy manner got me to actually say, all right, fine, I'll go. But yeah, now that we've both kind of been through the system, one of the things we've seen is how frustrating and difficult it is to get the help you need.
Oh yeah.
Our
system is so broken.
Yeah, and we're both, we have flexible schedules, we're both entrepreneurs, and so we can go at like Tuesday morning at 9, but so many people can't. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason we went with a program for the help, aside from the fact that in the plot, Aiden couldn't go to a professional, was how nice would it be to just turn this thing on when you need it, not when it fits somebody else's schedule. And if we can work out VR games that let you walk around in a world, why couldn't you work out a VR program that lets you sit down with a psychologist? That's a much more applicable situation for everyday life. And it just helps with the problem of scheduling. It's one of those nice dreams you can have in spec-fic of, I wish I could just turn this on when I need it, not when it works for the psychologist's schedule.
I mean, the good news is we're getting more into telehealth and whatnot, but that's a whole other conversation. So I'm just going to throw a PSA out for watchers real quick. Go see a therapist.
Yes.
Even if you don't have any sort of neurodivergence like depression or anxiety or whatnot, we all need therapy. We need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it. Go do it.
Yeah, just existing in this world is like hard enough. Like, definitely go see someone. And also, you know, in the back of these books for our listeners, there are some amazing resources, which I can also link in the description of this video, for, you know, people who are experiencing all sorts of things. And definitely, you know, there's a lot of free resources out there. They're just not always the easiest to find.
And that's why we started putting the resources in the back. If somebody randomly picks up a book and says, oh my God, I'm going through this, we want them to flip to the back and say, you're not ready to go. It's really frustrating when somebody says, go get help. And then you say, great, how?
Right.
So we wanted to help with that in a small way.
Yeah, I've definitely found myself like in a point where I was like just super anxious, and like for my work, I travel for work. So like talk about a schedule that's not flexible. I'm not even in the same state most of the time. And I've just like reached out to, I mean, like mutual friends on Twitter, but like like essentially strangers, and been like, so I think I have the same symptoms you have. It's like, that's not, you know, that's good. That's a start of a support network, but like those people aren't professionals, and you're also asking someone to carry some of your emotional weight, which, you know, maybe they're dealing with their own shit. So
It's also the internet, so every once in a while you'll put out something very authentic and get slapped upside the head.
We haven't really had with this series yet.
No, we've been lucky so far. We haven't gotten any drive-by 1-star reviews yet.
I was wondering too, because like in the beginning there is this disclaimer about, you know, some of the characters, and my initial reaction, like to be honest, was like, do we need like warnings for types of characters like this? Because in a lot of ways, you know, people will use those types of warnings as a form of othering. And so at first I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I realized like, well, it also is going to help people find it.
Yes.
And it will avoid, you know, people getting offended and leaving those nasty 1-star reviews. And I started to read it as not as a warning, but as like a welcome sign in a lot of ways.
We pretty much decided to put the disclaimer in as kind of an attempt to create a safe space in the book.
If you don't belong here, here's your door if you want out. Mm-hmm. And it actually has been helpful because so we originally put it in for 2 reasons. And we got the idea from Gail.
To keep minors from reading explicit sex scenes.
Yes. Because we have had the uncomfortable moment of a couple of folks have been like, oh, a queer representing, I gotta get this to my kids.
Definitely 18 and older, please.
Yeah. So we got the idea originally from Gail Carragher. She puts a very beautifully snarky start to all of her books with sexual content, especially her San Andreas Shifters series, which is queer werewolves in San Francisco. And I'm going to mangle it. I'm paraphrasing horribly here. But it goes something like, there are romantic and carnal scenes between men if love in its many forms and love's results in even more varied forms offend you. I have a YA series over here, and she gives the name. Thank you for your self-reflection and understanding. And it's a great way for her to be like, I get that some people are prudes. If you have a problem with it, go there. And so it's a CYA, it's covering our butts, but it's also, hey, if this is your thing, be here. We're working on book 3 right now, which comes out August 6th, and our sensitivity reader reading for trans issues did specifically say, this can be very triggering. This one incident, no spoilers, in the plot can be very triggering. So put it in a trigger warning at the beginning of the book. And I looked at that, checked it, and said, okay, we can say, hey, this happens. And it's a good way for people to just be ready.
And I do think that there's a lot of conversation in the literary world about trigger warnings and the need for them, or, you know, people being oversensitive and things like that. And I think a lot of it just boils down to misunderstanding the term trigger.
Yeah.
And just like that's I think that's really what it is. It's just sort of a misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's basically, when we're talking about trigger warnings in the context of our book, it's this particular situation happens, which we know is and can be traumatic for people.
Mm-hmm.
And if that might send you into a depression spiral, or give you an anxiety attack, or aggravate PTSD, or like do anything mentally that we don't want happening to you, and you don't want happening to you, skip this part.
Yeah.
It's our way of saying, like,
life sucks, we don't want to make it suck more for you.
Yeah, we're not setting out to trigger people.
Yeah.
It's just with the content of our books and the things that our characters are going through psychologically, we're gonna have to touch on some things, and it's gonna suck.
Mm-hmm. But it'll be worth it in the end. And also, like I said, from the practical point of view, it's a CYA. I don't want to get a 1-star review. There was sex in here. You were warned. Page 3. So none of that.
And I think too, a lot of people, at least, folks that I follow on Twitter and whatnot, when they talk about trigger warnings, it's more like, I just want to go in prepared. I just don't want to be surprised. And for me, like reading's a little bit less triggery for me. But like with films, it's like, just tell me if someone gets raped. Just tell me, and I can either cover my eyes or I just know. Like that's all I need to know. And I think that's exactly, yeah, you can just go in prepared. And I think what's also important is sometimes you want to go read those scenes because you want to see how the character overcomes it. Because like you were talking about, you're exploring these identities with your characters. And I think a lot of fiction helps us solve our own problems in a more organic and sort of subconscious way. And I think that's really useful too when you're seeing them combat things that you've combated yourself.
Yeah. And that's a big thing we wanted to showcase, was all of this is difficult and it sucks dead rat through a straw, but it can be overcome. And it isn't even like a dragon you fight once and it's done. It's more like something riding your back. Yes, the weight is there. Yes, it's hard, but you'll keep walking and you'll be okay. Doing this, you've got it. And that's a big thing we wanted to showcase, was that you can just keep dealing with it day by day and have a good life. So that's a big thing. The only thing we did not trigger warning for was cursing, and that was where I was like, if you can't deal with a cuss word, grow up.
With a lot of cuss words.
With a lot of cuss words.
Janice cusses a lot.
Okay, Janice cusses creatively. That's her. So our hydroelectric specialist, she does all of so their base is mobile. It can be taken apart and moved on a regular basis, and they move it because surveillance patterns are built up by the AI and the drone systems that are patrolling all of the US. So wherever they go, they have to have power, plumbing, air conditioning, because it hits 118 in the summer, and clean water and water filters. This is the lady who runs all of it. She runs it perfectly, and she cusses you out if you get in her way. She loves you as a base member, but she will cuss you out. But yeah, I come from a family where, let's just put it this way, I was encouraged to act like a lady. Despite the fact that many of the women in my family are in the armed forces. And so you're expected to be an officer and a lady, or an officer and a gentleman. Yeah, I bucked that.
I was gonna say, how's that going?
So I decided that constantly checking yourself for words that were triggering, beyond, not microaggressing or hurting someone,
Actively using slurs,
is one more form of, I guess, cultural suppression. So we have characters who cuss. Also, it's a military unit. They cuss. Deal with it.
I recently got, speaking of that, I recently got a one of those lovely 1-star reviews on my own sci-fi, and I mean it'll help other readers who feel the same, avoid it. And that's sort of how I'm looking at it. But what I thought was really funny was the reviewer said something about the profanity that my main character Nell uses. But despite that, I seem very nice online. And at first I was like, I need to swear more online. Because if you don't like her, you're not gonna like me, because like your character, she's very much a part of me. And yeah, I swear a lot. And I always think it's funny when people are like, it's not very realistic. It's like, I weeded out a lot of the profanity that like would be in more normal work conversation. And just like, people swear, not everyone, and I do have characters who don't, but like
well, and I think it's very situational. I mean, and it's very, the reason I mention it is because if it works for the character, I have seen some books where you're just like, really?
Yeah.
But if it works for the character, it should totally be part of their personality. That's just what happened. And the reason we mentioned Janice is because she's the creator. I'm not going to wreck your YouTube ratings by starting to cuss, but
no. Oh no, I swear all the time. You're fine.
Yeah, but she comes up with things where everyone else is like, nice one. But going back to Kevin, he curses very rarely, and when he does, everyone knows
something's up.
Yeah, everyone's like, uh-oh. And so when he does an exclamation, he's Jesuit, so it's usually something fake instead of something profane. So when he says something profane, everyone's like, crap, are we in trouble? What's wrong? And fitting the use of language to the character is what matters. So I really don't care if we do get a 1-star review for profanity. If you can't see that that's part of some people's personality, then you need to read more or be around more people. Because so my day job is as a landscaper, and I used to run a crew, and I went in as an officer and a lady. Didn't work until I learned to curse in English and Spanish both. And then the guys essentially went, all right, he's not so stiff. All right, we're listening. So yeah, I learned that you fit your personality to the area. Mm-hmm. So I can be quite articulate and very professorial in my speech.
She can, yeah.
Or I can switch over to, hey guys, where's the fucking shovel? Yeah.
Yeah. I always think that's funny too. It's a form of code switching, I think, and a more subtle form of code switching, without a lot of the cultural weight to it, for sure. But yeah, it's and it's fun to show that too, because like our characters have all these different facets as well. And like with Kevin's case, like he doesn't always swear, but when he does, it means something. And you can see that in the writing when you pay attention to that, and when you have contrasted, with that characters who swear all the time, and it doesn't, maybe have the same weight to it.
Yeah, because when Janice swears, it just means she's talking.
Right. Her mouth is moving.
Yeah. Although we have been having fun talking about code switching with working on the fact that even Janice, so there are kids on the base, and that's very unusual for their unit. Even this character who cusses all the time tries to be cognizant and is like,
there's a child.
Yeah. Where's the kids? And we've enjoyed playing with that because it's a subtle way of showing respect. It's a subtle way of showing, I care how you're going to feel about this. And so there's a 10-year-old in the room, we'll write, they'll start to use their normal language and then go, Yeah. And when you change your language for the other person, it's a subtle way of showing, hey, I understand where you're coming from, or I understand what you need, and I want to give that to you.
Yeah, and that's, I think when you're showing that, especially, for example, using the word gamma in your book is a slur, and that's something that's brought up. And I thought that was a really neat way of showing people, like how you're playing with the idea of Kevin's privilege and him using it for good. People who do come from some form of privilege, whether it's because they're white or they're straight or they're male, whatever it happens to be, showing that in an organic way, and showing, like, Janice, for instance, starting to say gamma and then being like, oh, I said I wouldn't say that anymore, is a way of being like, yeah, okay, so she said she's going to stop. She slips up. She corrects herself. She apologizes and moves on, and it's not a big deal. And I think that's something that we need to see more of, because with our culture, and especially with the internet, people able to talk more and stand up for themselves more and having that safety to do that, privileged folk, we have that, like, oh shit, I can't say anything. It's like, that's not true. And I think it's important to show that, and readers will play off of that and be able to, incorporate into their own lives.
Well, that actually we drew from another project that we learned to write Activism together. The free webcomic we do called Tearmann. And a lot of the characters in that are based around Romani culture. And it's an alternate Earth, though we are drawing loosely from Romani culture. We're definitely not on point accuracy. But one of the things we learned was that gypsy is actually a slur. Mm-hmm. I'd never known that until we started doing more research on the Romani people. And worse than that is gyp, which I grew up hearing my grandma say, oh, that's a gyp. Mm-hmm. And I will occasionally, especially if I'm tired or have had a glass of whiskey, I will say that. And then I'm like, oh. And so that project taught us something really important. And I come from the upper Midwest, so I've been correcting my speech ever since. And now I'm like, wow, that's crap. I can change that. But I helped take care of my grandma, and I still hear her say it. She's 85, and I always debate, is this worth it? Graham? So point being, words have power, and words matter, and the subtleties of the small words you use, like gamma in our books and gyp in real life, those are like tiny knives. You don't realize you're carrying them, but they're still drawing blood.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, to bring it back to Aiden and gender issues, like getting misgendered, because I use they, them pronouns. And Liv has known me a long time, since before I started using they, them. And I know she's still working on it, but she's started catching herself now every time she uses she, her. And I'm so proud of her.
Yeah.
But
they can tell I've caught it because I go,
yeah, it's but there are a lot of cis people who are like, well, I can't use a pronoun because I don't know which one to use and I'm going to offend you. And it's use a pronoun. If someone corrects you, use the corrected one. Because most people I know, and yes, there are a few outliers who are going to get pissed no matter what, but most people I know are pretty understanding of, I know you grew up in a binary society. I know this is how I look. I know this is what you expect. So I understand that this is going to come out of your mouth first. But if I tell you I use they, them, please use they, them after that. And there's one time I was at a convention and I was moderating a roundtable, or I was the guest at a roundtable, one of the two, and I introduced myself as, hi, I'm Nonir and Olivia, I use they, them. 5 minutes later, someone was calling me she, or her, or whatever, and I'm just like, I just introduced myself with my pronouns. It is not that hard.
And it's not like that person knows you, previously.
That's what pisses me off. Like I cut my friends leeway because I know it's a big transition and it's a relatively new transition for me. But if I literally just met you and said, these are the pronouns I use, and then gender me, I want to punch you in the face.
It's on purpose then.
And Nonir brings up a really good point in that as allies, you're going to fuck up. You're going to slip up, fix it, and move on.
And don't make a big deal out of it.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing that I've heard, at least in the community. I haven't experienced luckily, but people slipping up and then making it about them.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. It's totally my fault. I'm the worst person ever, that sort of thing.
I've offended you. Quick, take care of me.
Yeah.
Just, I'm sorry, move on. Fix your behavior,
And just throwing this out there for listeners, as an ally with an anxiety disorder, I sometimes have problems with this where I'm like, do I owe you a huge apology? Do I screwed up, I screwed up. Take a deep breath and just say, I'll do better. And do better. Relax. And if they're, if the person you messed up with is really angry and berating you, they probably had a shit day.
Yeah, it probably has nothing to do with you, or it has a little to do with you, but
it has a bit to do with you, but
you're the last thing in a long line of probably the same thing happening.
Yeah, I struggle with that, and so I'm just throwing that out to listeners. And it's funny because circling back to the characters, as Aiden becomes more open with a lot of the different characters, this comes up where some of the characters, how do we support you? And some of them did it better than others. And there are definitely those moments where it's like, crap. And I like writing the characters, working on that, but not making it the marginalized person's issue. It's your issue to work on your assumptions. So fix them, work on them, keep working on them. And that's the key. Like I said before, it's not a dragon. You don't beat it once. It's like training a puppy. You keep working on it. And you put down newspapers.
And invest in some odor eliminating something or another.
And do your research. And there's a scene in the books where Kevin is, spoilers, starting to fall in love with Aiden. And he goes and asks the medical officer for papers. And Kevin is very much a research-based personality. He's like, I figured out I can get it right, which is straight out of my character, my personality.
It's funny.
So the point is, he knows he has stuff going on with himself that he needs to learn more. He needs to get it right. So he goes quietly and says, I need research material that's not off their equivalent of the internet that I know will be right. If I ask a medical person, they can give me solid intel, and I don't have to wonder if I've just read bullshit on the internet. So yeah, make it your problem. Go do your research. And that goes for all parts of any culture that's not your own that you're researching. Go read. Go to the library. Go and vet your sources. That's my other thing. Yeah. Like, go to somebody who knows what they're talking about, because the internet is tricky for research.
Yeah, try and find someone who has experienced it in the very least. But like, don't badger them. I always talk about this with sensitivity reading. Like, the step before sensitivity reading is sitting down and listening, finding people and just hearing what they have to say. Don't ask them questions. I mean, eventually you can work up to that if it's, in an appropriate setting. But yeah, just listen.
Yeah, learning to listen is really a huge struggle.
Yeah, it's amazing what actually listening will do.
Mm-hmm. So sort of like segue from that, speaking of listening to one another, co-writing is something that has really fascinated me. And I have a very good friend, and she and I, we share a universe, but we haven't like actually co-written a single piece together. And partially because we both love each other to death, but I think we'd probably kill each other. So how, especially because you guys have been friends for so long, like, did that completely change your friendship, or how do you separate like work selves and friend selves and all of that?
I think really the biggest change it's created is actually encouraging us to set boundaries.
Yes.
Because Liv gets super absorbed in a project and like laser focuses on it and just wants to work on it all the time, and I have my fingers in like 20 different pies. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing this and fan art or fan fiction and fanzines and my own novels and short stories and my day job and like all these other things where sometimes I'm just so overwhelmed I can't deal with it. And so it's co-writing has kind of given me permission to say, okay, Liv, I can't talk about this right now. Mm-hmm. I will get back to you when I can.
Yeah. What I've learned on my end is to ask, hey, you got headspace for this today? You got the spoons for this today? And that has been a big lesson for me. Part of the problem we ran into when we started really working on projects together was we found out we had opposite stress responses. When I don't like the real world, I dive into projects, I hide in them, I stay in them because I don't want to deal with the real world. And when Nonir's stressed,
I hide from everything.
Yeah, they disconnect from heavy work.
That's when I go and binge fanfic or play video games or just watch movies.
Yeah. Whereas I tend to do this thing of, I want to do something creative and worthy. I have to work on something worthy because that's how I refill my pool. And so the fact that we talked about it, we said, okay, we're realizing we have opposite stress responses. I'm hiding in this project in order to not think about XYZ.
And I have to get away from that project.
Yeah, and you need to get away.
Especially for a while when we had really just started getting serious about it, and then I started going to therapy and started realizing I was way too close to Aiden. Yeah. And was dealing with too much of the same stuff, and I just could not handle going back and looking at that character and what we put him through. And that was a hard time because I wanted it to get done, but I could not do anything on this project. And Liv felt super guilty for like trying to do everything. I was like, no, go do the thing. I'm just gonna curl up in the corner and like cry myself to sleep. It's fine.
So it worked out because what we essentially ended up at was radical compassionate honesty. I want to stress the compassionate part because I've met people who think radical honesty is you never do anything. No, that's not radical honesty.
That's being an asshole.
An asshole. That's being a brutal asshole. So what we learned was to say, you know, exactly how we're really feeling, which is I say now, I really need to work on something. Can I go ahead with this part? And we'll wait on this other part until you've got the spoons for it. And I can also say, hey, I'm really proud of this. Can I show you this snippet? You don't need to do anything with it. Versus, hey, I need an idea here. What do you think of this? Mm-hmm. Essentially, drop the passive aggressive crap and just be honest about what you're looking for. If you're just looking for validation as a co-author, say, hey, I wrote a line. I really want you to see it. And the other person can say, oh, that's awesome. And then you don't have to say anything else. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for help, say, I need help. And then the key is accept when there are no spoons. And, you know, it's not today. The other thing is scheduling. Like, both of us have crazy busy lives. So learning to compassionately schedule and say, you know, if you tell me, so my symbol is the otter. I get really into things and happy. If you tell me no a bunch of times, I feel like I've been put off. But if you tell me, not today, Wednesday at 3:00, I'm fine because I have it in my head, Wednesday at 3:00. Once we learn that about each other.
Yeah, and I think that's really strengthened our friendship too, because those are communication techniques that we take outside of just writing together. And hey, we're hanging out and I'm feeling X and I need to tell you that because I don't want to talk about this subject or set a boundary or whatever.
Well, and Nonir, do you want to tell listeners about spoons? Because I realize I've used that a couple of times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, spoon theory, for those who might not know, is a theory that came off the internet. What? I don't.
A good one.
It is. I don't remember exactly who came up with it, but the general idea is that everyone has so many spoons in a day to represent your energy, and different activities take different amounts of spoons depending on who you are, what the activity is. It was originally used for chronic pain to describe, like, I'm in pain, so I can only do this much today. But it's kind of become a mental health thing as well. So for example, like taking a shower might take 2 spoons a day and 6 spoons the other day, and you only have 10 spoons a day. And you have to figure out how to schedule that and how to prioritize those things. And for me, it's a very useful metaphor.
And it became useful for me to learn because then I could say, hey, do you have the spoons for this today? And it removed, I'd say, the shame element of working on a project, because now it's about working out what energy levels we're both at, not who's getting productive at things done, because that needs to be removed. Anytime you're working on a co-authored project, get the shame out of the room right now.
Yeah.
Or any project, actually, I think, because I always feel ashamed when I haven't like done enough.
Okay. Like this has been my therapy session for like the last 6 months of dealing with productivity and the way that capitalism has instilled in us these values of we're only worth something if we're productive and if we're producing something. And that is not true. It's so hard to get over.
It really is.
And I'm getting so much more political than I anticipated.
Well, given what we write,
but yeah, it's hard. And then having someone else bounce off to say, well, the team was productive.
Yes.
Or, you know, we can look at this thing and say, we accomplished that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we sold books yesterday.
Yeah. And we networked.
And just having the little wins helps a lot, I think.
Especially with creativity too, because it's such a journey.
It really is a journey. And I guess circling back to your original question, the biggest thing with co-authoring is just be compassionate, be honest, and be realistic.
Yeah.
That's also something too, like, because, you know, Marissa and we were business partners for a long time, and, you know, we both struggle with anxiety and depression in different ways, and we have completely opposite schedules. I work like doing creative stuff on the weekends because I travel for work and I'm away from like all of my computers and stuff. And she has 3 children, and so the weekends are her off time because, you know, they're home from school. And we're so bad at boundaries and communication. We're just like so bad about it. And finally, when we decided, you know, amicably, of course, to like sort of go in different directions because we wanted different things, that was when we had those conversations. And we're like, wow, like it's so shitty that it took us so long. And also just understanding how the other person wants to receive appreciation. I sort of draw from the, like, I think it's like 5 love languages or something, but that idea of each person displays and receives affection or appreciation or acknowledgement in different ways, and understanding that, because that's like, you know, in friendship, especially because that's a relationship, you know, understanding that is just so hard, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, it's always going to be a little hard, but it doesn't need to be as hard as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you address an important point, because right when Nonir was starting therapy, I was having a lot of family issues.
It was not a good time for either of us.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I want to tell people who are having these kinds of creative relationships, it's okay to go through rocky patches. It doesn't mean things are ending. It might just be a rocky patch. And if you've done a lot of traveling, you know that there are parts of the trip you just hate. You just hate. That doesn't mean the trip sucks. It just means that part sucked. So
that road needs to be paved better.
Yes. Or, wow, that airport's awful. So we hit a rocky patch where I was dealing with a lot of family issues and painful situations, and I was getting diagnosed with anxiety and refusing it. And Nonir was dealing with their own stuff, and I was, you know, we hit a point where I was just sobbing, and we were talking things out. And like you said, it's sad that you hit that point where you should have had that conversation about 3 months ago, but don't be afraid of the hard conversations, I guess. Work through them, remove shame, remove blame, hold up your end of your actions, and then move forward. And it's okay that it's rocky.
And it's hard.
Oh,
It is really hard work.
Oh yeah, it sucks to have rat through a straw.
I mean,
it does. But,
especially if you grew up socialized as female or as a minority of some nature. Because we are socialized not to take up space,
yes,
not to talk about our own needs. not to set those boundaries. And it's really, really difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
But it is possible.
And especially if you're also socialized in the capitalist productivity culture, where you're counting your worth by how much you got done, that also causes problems.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason that our characters started book one so messed up, because they failed something very big, and their whole sense of worth was, I take care of my family and I kick ass.
And they didn't do either of those.
Yes. And so suddenly they're spiraling all the way down simply because a situation that was out of their control got, okay, how spoilery do we want to be?
I mean, it's the first chapter.
Okay, yeah. So
the first like quarter of the book I think is safe.
So the premise of book one is poor Aiden arrives at this notorious amazing base, who used to have twice as high of a success rate on their missions against the corporations as everyone else, and then went from 100 to 0 in 6 months. And it was because their commander, who'd been with them for 25 years, got bone cancer and died, and nobody could get him the treatment. Well, that means the team couldn't get him the treatment. And this man they all loved as either an old friend for the old hands or a father figure died because they couldn't get him medication. I know. One of those things. So that's where we start the book, and the interim commanders, there were 2 of them in the last 6 months, they got pranked until they begged for transfers.
And a lot of those pranks sounded like they were pretty deserved, I think, in some cases.
We actually originally wrote more about the pranks, and then we said, this is fluff, get out. But if you look at our website, there's a page for a roster of all the characters, and you can read exactly what some of those pranks were in detail. Mm-hmm. And they were deserved, but they were impressive. And
you had a lot of fun thinking those up.
Yes, I did. I also borrowed too much from, if anybody out there watches MASH 4077, I grew up with that as comfort food for the brain. And so there's one of the pranks, which is in Lazarus's entry. Lazarus is the munitions officer. He knows how to clean guns, how to load them, exactly which gun to use in which situation. And he also knows exactly how to get under other people's skin. He's
he's the class clown.
Yeah, he's the Spitfire. He's the class clown. He's a pistol in every sense of the word. So he did a prank that I based off the episode with the dummy. The line that always gets stuck in my head is, a flower here, a flower there, a piece of dummy everywhere. Yes. So you get a sense of these guys you've got clever, young, bored, energetic, and well-trained people, and they're pissed. You are screwed. And we really enjoyed putting that together. But to circle back to my original point, they're acting like this because their entire sense of why they're worthy is gone. The character copes with their own trauma in their own way. So Kevin just stops sleeping. He starts taking drugs to stay up all night and work all the time. And Lazarus just gets more pranky and weirder with his pranks and scarier with his pranks.
Janice just gets mean.
Janice gets vicious and threatens to hit you with a wrench. And she carries a wrench that's as long as your arm. So you take it seriously. Everyone copes in unhealthy ways. We wanted to showcase that's life. Everybody has their coping mechanisms that worked for one situation and have gotten carried through, but they're maladaptive now. My weakness is, and my friends and my family and my husband know that if I start to say, I'm sorry, more than, twice in a row?
Yeah.
Then I'm starting to go into an anxiety spiral, because I can get down to this point where I'm crying and just repeating I'm sorry about anything I can think of. And that means that I feel invalid in that moment. And if that happens, people have to take me by the shoulder and just be like, you're fine. So yeah, everyone needs that kind of support, and everyone needs to get over this idea that we have to be productive all the time, because that turns you into an anxious mess.
I think that's something too that, like, in the dystopian cyberpunk worlds is examined, but I think your series sort of takes it the next step, because in a lot of ways, a lot of films, mostly because cyberpunk is a pretty heavy film genre.
Very visual.
Yeah, it'll show that struggle against, you know, the corporate thing, the just this like dystopian world, but it doesn't always show the exact path out.
Mhm.
And if it does, it's usually pretty filled with despair. And yeah, exactly. And
Yes.
and Aces High Joker's Wild is really like the hopeful side of the coin. And I think part of that strength comes from the fact that on the Kauai grid, you have this cyberpunk dystopia, you know, neon lights, ads everywhere, you know, everything's about money, everything's about credit. And then on the other side, you have this almost solar punk in a lot of ways, community, because they're just living off the land and what they can scrounge. And I think showing those in equal amounts is really brings the hope. I think it brings the hope to the series.
Which was kind of one of our starting points, and the thing we really wanted to do was we didn't want to write something that just added to depression and the bleakness of the world around us and rehashed all of those cyberpunk tropes. We needed something to uplift us, and we figured if it could uplift and help us, then maybe it could uplift and help other people too.
Yeah, and what really pushed us into getting serious about this was bloody 2016, because everywhere we looked, all of our friends, all of our communities were just getting darker and more fractious and more unhappy, and yes, more nihilistic, where people were just despairing. They were either furious or despairing. And so we said, okay, fine, we're going to take it as dark as we can possibly go, and then we're going to say, okay, we're in this dark place. Then how do we get out? Because everyone was just yelling, we're going downhill. Fine. Let's get past that.
It's also really entertaining because Liv is like the eternal optimist and I'm the eternal pessimist. So writing wise, a lot of it too was I would come up with awful scenarios to throw our characters into, and then she would find the way to get them out.
Yes.
And she would write the hopeful stuff and I would write the awful stuff.
And there are some scenes where it's definitely shown because Aiden will say something really depressing and Kevin will be like, quit that. Yeah. And that was definitely them and me just going, okay, you threw me that line. I know what to do with that. You quit. And it's been really fun, you know, instead of the horror of we're sliding downhill. Okay, we're at the bottom of the hill. That is a high hill. Let's climbing. Let's go. And yes, what you said is exactly what we're aiming for. The series is going to evolve further and further from cyberpunk up the hill into solarpunk. And if things go well, our dream is to do a Coda trilogy, a YA Coda trilogy of pure solarpunk after the war is won. Yes, I will do one big spoiler, which is things get better.
We have a happy ending.
One would hope.
Better of the next generation after this fight, because one of the tropes that has always bothered me personally, I think it bothers both of us, is that so many stories stop at the war is won. But I'm a big history buff myself, and we're both well read. Wars aren't like that. You sign the treaty, you wave the flag, and then you get to the hard work, which is rebuild, hold Nuremberg trials, correct things, try to fix problems, try to make the world work again.
Addressing all of the mindsets that came from the war and from the things previously that are just so ingrained in people's consciousness. Like nowadays, the productivity.
Well, our GDP comes directly out of trying to measure what we were producing during World War II, and so does our food production. And this is something that has always slightly irked me. I really enjoy studying American history, but it irks me on a great many occasions. So one of the things that irks me is we are still producing our food and measuring our country by wartime survival standards. No wonder we're having problems.
Well, and no wonder we keep starting wars where we don't need to, because we don't have the justification. Well, what's the point?
Yeah, we're running a peacetime society on a total war. Well, yeah, but on a total war footing for our economy and our agriculture and our food production. And that creates problems. But an entire generation of kids grew up between World War I and World War II thinking this was the norm. And that's something else we're looking forward to addressing. The technical term is operating baseline, but when you grow up with something, you just think that's normal. And it's one of the reasons I like having a history buff character in the story, because I use Kevin to occasionally say, it's not supposed to hit 118 around here. It only got to 90. And, Colfax Expressway used to be called Colfax Avenue, and it used to look like this. It used to be pretty. Well, sort of.
The longest, wickedest street in America.
Yeah. It's been funny because we have a gang on the Colfax Expressway in the next forthcoming book that's trading in the Oregon market. So when I was talking to locals, I was like, yeah, just a little different from now. Colfax has a bit of a reputation in Denver. But yeah, we need to look at history and examine our assumptions, examine our baselines, and examine where they came from. And one of my favorite examples is neighborhood. Like, oh, that's a bad neighborhood. Okay, why? Did it get redlined? Did it get pushed to the side when development happened?
Gentrification!
Yeah. History, studying history and studying systems gives you anger, but it also gives you a sense of resolve, because you don't end up with this helpless, hopeless feeling of the world is just what it is.
This is again where we're different people.
Yeah, it gives me a sense of resolve, but I get a sense of resolve from the fact that, okay, somebody made this decision, so we can unmake it.
Right. Yeah, you can untangle all of those pieces, and when you have the pieces, you can rearrange them.
Exactly, but you have to know the pieces first. And I grew up seeing other kids going to school in a lot of different schools and a lot of people. So I moved around a lot as a kid. And I would watch so many people just say, well, I'm bad at math, or, well, my neighborhood sucks, in this resigned tone. You don't have to accept that stuff. Find out why. I mean, I was bad at math. I almost failed it in college, and I got a tutor. And I traded house cleaning for tutoring. And I had been taught that you looked for tools. I was lucky to have been taught that. Because if someone hadn't taught me, no, go get a tutor, then I would have just accepted that I failed at math. But no.
I still failed math.
Oh, I still fail at it, but I passed the class in college. So I guess we need to teach people there are reasons for things. You don't just have to accept that things suck. And that's one of the reasons we showcase so much of what we do, and so much of people using tools. Use the program to treat your mental health. Exercises to calm down. You don't have to accept that the situation sucks.
Taking medication is okay.
Yes, take your meds.
There's no shame in it.
Yes.
And if that one's not working, find another one. It's not just because it's meds.
Yeah, and nothing is wrong with you. You have a different wiring system. So just like you find the right part for your machines, you don't try to stick the printer cartridge from one machine into another machine and then complain because it got broke. No, you don't do that. You go buy the right one for the right machine. You figure out which brand you are and find the right tools for that model.
And you can change which brand you are too, sometimes.
Yes.
It takes it can take a long time, and it can take a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I guess the thing I keep stressing is you're not broken, you're just different. This isn't something I've really struggled with as an adult because it's easiest to say I have anxiety, but the condition I actually have is called hyperinsulinemia, which means I produce too much insulin and too much adrenaline. Some of Tweak is me. We bounce off the walls and then go, "Don't touch me!" Yeah, hers is mine dialed up all the way. It's a condition where you can pass out if you don't eat, and you can get touch sensitivity very easily.
I can't tell you how many times we've been working and she started to shake. I'm just like, Liv, you need to eat something.
Well, the problem with hyperinsulinemia is it turns off your sense of needing to eat, but you're also burning through your food twice as fast. So you're sitting there going, "Oh, I'm shaking. Oh, I wonder why."
That's odd.
Really ridiculous. So the reason I bring it up is because with diet and the right medication, you can treat it and have a really fun life. But it does take some work to figure out the treatments. And living in a family and a country that really wants you to be strong all the time and perfect all the time.
Or dead.
Or dead, yeah. You start feeling like you owe perfection and feeling ashamed whenever your body doesn't live up to standard.
I just feel like I'm in a therapy session.
I'll put that in the description. Therapy session with OE Tearmann.
Yeah, therapy session for creatives.
Didn't mean to become mental health advocates, and here we are.
Yeah, well, it's because that's why we're wired, but sometimes that's what you need.
Well, that's why you're writing your books.
Yeah. Well, certainly back to what I was saying earlier about history. We keep getting compliments on how creative our world is. I wanted to throw this out here while we're on the subject of cycles and systems and research. A lot of what we have is straight up stolen from the 1890s, the Gilded Age of America. What I'm talking about has already happened with less tech, but it already happened. And people who say that can't happen in America need to read more history.
It already did.
Yeah, so for examples, we have a system called the citizen standing system. And you are graded. In the book, yes. You are graded according to how closely you follow the rules. Like, people are reporting things all the time. Your phone is reporting you on what you're reading, what you're looking at, how long you're on your phone, all that kind of stuff. So if you're playing a lot of video games, that goes in your record. And the corporation you are contracted to, aka indentured for life to, determines what their standards are for a good citizen. So they grade you. And you go from citizen excellent, which almost nobody has, 0.1% of the population, down to citizen poor standing, which means you don't get access to the fast trains, you can't get on an airplane, you have to live in certain neighborhoods, you get higher interest on all your loans, all that kind of stuff. So they aggregate all your actions as a citizen with your credit score. And that's your citizen standing.
Isn't it fun how close we are to that?
Yeah. I was going to say, wait, I thought this was about the book.
Well, a man named Pullman of the Pullman Train Car Company already had a employee rating system, and it was called the employee standing. And you got graded along 4 standings, depending on how often you showed up to work, whether you went to church, whether you were married, whether you had children, and whether you were caught spitting on the factory floor. And I think he had a couple of other things, but it was stuff like that. And it was because they were working on luxury rail cars for the wealthy. And when you built this, it had, Ottoman carpets and velvet seats. And if you got tobacco juice on the velvet seat, you went down to poor employee rating because they had to replace that velvet. I stole it. I straight up. But I wanted people to know that very honestly and very openly. We're not doing anything that's all that unusual. We're borrowing right from the 1890s.
Well, we haven't learned from it.
Yeah. Well, we're borrowing the two things that made the 1890s, which was laissez-faire economics and paternalistic social ideals. And then we just took it and made it worse. So,
and added the tech from today.
yeah, because if a man like Pullman had today's tech, oh boy.
I mean, already, like, employers will ask to see your Facebook.
Yes.
And, like, I mean, I'm pretty much hardly ever on Facebook as, like, my own private personal self. But, like,
It's scary where we are now.
Yeah.
And that's going back. One of the main reasons we started writing this was we needed hope.
We did. But frankly, we think we have it bad. You read about, shout out to listeners and readers. If you haven't heard about this, you need to read about it. The situation for the Uyghurs in China is a lot worse. So when you think America is fucked, look around the world. The Uyghurs had to have sensors installed on their doors in Xinjiang province in China that tells the government how long they've been outside, how long they've been out of their house. They had to have stuff installed to say how many calls they make. Their calls are monitored. I should say the Uyghurs are the Muslim minority in China. So something we have shamelessly borrowed is it's easy to do anything when you shout terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
So when you shout terrorists and say we brought terrorists to justice, guess what? You have a free pass to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
The government is shouting terrorism and doing pretty terrible things to this minority that doesn't have a lot of options. But that said, if you stand together, if you work together, you can rise and you can fight even this kind of a system.
And you have to. Yeah.
It is your duty to help each other, take care of each other, and be compassionate for each other. I mean, everybody has that one day that sucks. Everybody has their own life experiences that shape them. So try to be compassionate. Now, I'm not saying be a doormat. I want to make that clear. If someone is not trying to fix their shit, that's not your responsibility. So, I just had to.
And also,
therapy.
Yeah, go to therapy.
go to therapy. Also, activism isn't always, getting out and marching on the streets. Obviously, in a lot of ways, it is and it needs to be. But, for people like me who are disabled in some way or, don't have the means, activism can be art, like what we were talking about earlier, writing a book that pushes the boundaries or that shows someone a new way out of where they're at. That is just as important. And if we don't imagine where we could be, like, we'll never get there, ever.
And art brings people together. It inspires people, and it makes people think. And those are all incredibly important things for where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad you guys brought this point up because it's a very important point. It's an essential point to make right now. Fighting doesn't mean a knife or a gun every time. Sometimes the fighting you can do is donating to a cause.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
taking care of each other.
Yeah, taking care of each other, being compassionate in a time when compassion is a scarce commodity. Fight with the tools you have. If the tool you have is a pen, pick it up. If the tool you have is a paintbrush, pick it up. If you have dollars, use them. If you have a voice, use it. You don't have to fight like a warrior. You can fight like a bard. You can fight like a cleric. You can fight by
social justice bard.
Yeah. And
figure out your class, and not like your class, but like
figure out your D&D class.
Figure out your D&D class.
Pop social justice in front of it, and then do the thing.
Yes. And quiet activism is just as important as loud activism. I recommend a movie called The Resistance Banker for anyone who's feeling hopeless, because it is a movie about the Dutch resistance in World War II and a banker who fiddled the numbers and did a lot of very clever things to make sure that the Dutch resistance and pretty much the whole Allied force had a ridiculous amount of funding.
So if there are any bankers out there, I'm sorry.
Well,
Stop doing. I didn't say that.
well, okay, if hackers want to really do something useful, delete everybody's student loans.
Dude, right?
But, okay, great example that there was I don't know all the details on this. Please research on your own. But there was somebody who, when Trump was speaking, got into the image files and put up a new American presidential seal that shows the eagle double-headed, like the Russian eagle, holding a sack of dollars and a golf club.
And it says 45 is a puppet.
Yep.
Spanish?
In Spanish. That is very quiet, but very powerful resistance, very powerful activism. And the fact that nobody started laughing until afterwards is also a form of activism.
Yeah.
Was Tweak there by any chance?
I'm definitely stealing some ideas here.
Tweak time traveled back to code it in.
You bastard. Guess what? Although then it would have said, 45, go fuck yourself.
with her little dragon sign. Yeah.
So I will give away a secret later in the story.
I probably already know it.
I don't think you know this one yet.
What book is it from?
Tweak's actual last name is Young, which is the Chinese word for dragon, and her parents call her the Lucky Dragon Girl before they died. She still thinks about that and goes, "Aw, they were just telling me my disability isn't that bad. Stupid parents." But she still calls herself in private, in her head, the Dragon Girl. And her symbol when she's coding is a dragon. And yes, and there's going to be a very big event in book 3. And a whole lot of servers are suddenly going to have a big picture of a roaring luck dragon stuck on them.
But she has nothing to do with it, I'm sure.
Just a coincidence.
Yeah. So yeah, fight with the tools you had. If you're a coder, use code. If you are a crafter, put little notes in the pockets of things to make people think about it. There's a whole TED Talk about quiet activism. And I'm really glad you guys brought this up because I wish I'd thought of bringing it up. Neither of us are built for going to protests.
Mm.
And we both learned that fast and hard. And so this is our way of being in the resistance. We tell a story for hope.
Just as important.
We each have our own businesses and stories as well that incorporate that. Like with your work is all really hopeful and uplifting.
Yeah.
And my business, Wandering Out in Crafts, is all about uplifting and supporting marginalized communities through art and spiritual services.
Yeah.
So I've got my own books. I'm doing art. I want to do some workshops.
Yeah.
Quiet activism is the way to go for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because change is not always loud.
In fact, change is often roots growing under the ground. So I own a landscaping business, and my activism is to push native Colorado gardens and fixing plant deserts, giving out free plans for gardens when people are trying to figure out what to plant. And that's huge for me because cutting down our water use is essential if we're not going to run out of water in Denver. Excuse me.
Which, I mean, then that we see that in the series too, is they're constantly worried about how much water we're using, how much, resources we're using. Can we do this? And that's something we need to have been worrying about like decades ago. But we need to worry about it now.
Yeah, and we really need. So my quiet activism is head down, plants in the soil, planting things for the future. Getting rid of frickin' Kentucky bluegrass. They've heard a lot of Kentucky bluegrass,
Yeah.
which is not very quiet, but when I'm with my clients, I'm just like, this will really help with your water bill. So we'll put in this garden, and we'll do this. And in my head, I'm going, yes, more grass.
Make them think it's their idea.
Yeah, very much. You can subtly encourage things. And for those of folks who are feeling hopeless, it is an incremental world. There are very few events where you can put your finger on something and say, this changed everything. And even those events are usually nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
No, and most of it is a biased version of history that we're getting.
Yeah,
You
simplified.
You don't see the behind the scenes things. You
Or the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah. See the end.
Yeah. We as humans like simple stories, so we tend to tell simple, direct stories. You know, there was a march in
We wrote
Birmingham.
a really complicated book series.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of, well, and it's funny because we do play with that. Like, Kevin tends to oversimplify history and be like, oh yeah, Rockefeller, he did lots of good things with his money, but he did horrible things first. And that's a whole chapter of history just turned into two sentences. But anyway, yeah, it's not simple. It's incremental. Everything's incremental. So do something small every day, even if it's, I need to get my mental health together. I need to take a shower. That's not selfish. First, make sure you're strong, and then go out and help others be strong.
Secure your air mask before helping others.
I just wrote a blog post about that last week.
Yeah. And this is something else I want to stress. Our characters are living in a world where people are dying on a regular basis. I mean, one of the corporations is a medical corporation that kills babies when they're born outside of the genetic norms and throws them away to be turned into dog food. This is the world they live in. But they still have a movie night every week. They still joke with each other, and they still listen to loud music.
Kevin still makes everybody watch Oklahoma.
Yeah. They still play games. They still have a Christmas party. Don't feel guilty that you are taking pleasures in the colors of a leaf or everyday things. Yes, the world is full of horrible things, but it's okay to say, I had a really good day today. Or, this ice cream is great. Or, hey, it's pretty. That's okay. And that's okay for you, and it's okay for somebody else. Let yourself be happy in small moments, because that gives you the courage to keep going. And for the love of all gods above and below, quit attacking people on the internet who are trying to be wholesome. Quit. Well, you should really be upset about this thing.
I am. Just give me a minute.
I am, but this particular Twitter timeline is my fandom's safe space.
Yes.
Stop.
Well, and I mention this because we try to push the idea that you can be happy. Even in the dark, you can still whistle. That's okay. You need to do that. And I'm guilty of this on my own Facebook timeline. There are a lot of issues that I'm trying to advocate for, and I fight and I think about a lot. But usually what you'll see on Facebook is, here's a happy plant.
Here's an otter.
Here's an otter.
Lots of otters.
Lots of otters. Because I figure there's enough darkness in the world. So I'm going to offer light and hope and resolve. Occasionally I'm going to say, oh God, this is fucked up. But most of the time I'm going to make you grin, because the last thing we need is one more dark place. So to your listeners, don't be afraid to be happy. Be happy in the moment and fight for the next moment.
Well,
Read our book.
Yeah, please read the books. Yeah, in the darkness, I think light is activism. So
Light candles.
whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So I think that's just about all the time we have here.
We went over it a little bit, didn't we?
You're fine. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. But for people who obviously now clearly want to read your books, where can folks find you online?
Well, on Facebook, we're at wildcards1407. We have our own website, aceshighjokerswild.com. And you can find O.E. Tearmann, it's spelled Tearmann, on the Great and Mighty Zon. And you, lovely Sarah, for that. But right now, those are the easiest places to find us. There's a mailing list, so if you want to sign up for the mailing list, you can keep getting a hold of things. And shout out, we are looking for advanced copy readers right now for book 3, and we will give out audiobooks and copies of book 1 if you want to get caught up. You can miss book 2, so you can do book 1 review, book 3 review,
and then go back and read book 2.
And want to, yeah, and be ready for August 6th. We really appreciate reviews as much as we just railed against capitalism.
But we still exist in the capitalist world, so.
We exist in that, so if you want to do an incremental thing, review a hopeful queer cyberpunk book, it really helps.
And just
tell your friends and family about it if you enjoy it. Because word of mouth is so important.
Yeah, because it's, you know, it's someone else saying this is good, not just us being like, our thing is good, I promise.
Well, and for good things, also just head over to the Audible. There is an audiobook for book 1. And it's just The Hands Were Given, O.E. Tearmann. It's read by the kick-ass Kurt Graves, who is awesome.
So good.
And if you want just to feel good and a little bit snarky, head over to our website and look up the Sing Along with the Story list. So it's aceshighjokerswild.com/sing along.
We have a soundtrack.
Yes,
every book has playlists. I love that.
Every book has an annotated playlist, and it's very much hold your head up and fuck the corpse.
And we'll put links to everything in the show notes. But if you want to just like real quick go find the first book, you can get it at books2read.com/handsweregiven. There's no apostrophe in that. So that's the new link. Yeah. By the way, surprise, guys.
Yay!
Yeah, for listeners, Sarah is amazing because we've been poking the systems going, work, damn you.
We've been fighting capitalism.
2,000 emails to Amazon later. Which I tried very hard to be polite. Very hard. But yeah, so definitely go check out their work because it's just so incredible, and it's just been such a privilege to be part of this project. I've said that like so many times, but like this book has like given me hope where I was like, I'm not doing anything. So just yes, you did your job. You can quit now, please don't.
Story has this way to flow. We're going.
But yeah, definitely go check it out and visit their awesome website. It's really fun, really interactive. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this awesome therapy session. Podcast.
Thank you for letting us ramble.
This has been the Amphibian Press podcast, and I'm Sara Boris, and with me today were the two halves of O.E. Tearmann. Thank you so much for listening.